This is the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores why one wants to be in the D. I am your host, Fyodor Ship III, the director of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. Join me as I interview students, scholars, leaders, and innovators about living, working, and loving in Detroit. Today's guest is a 1993 graduate of the University of Michigan. She went on to get her JD from Northwestern University. She is the former Senior Vice President, Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer, and Head of Corporate Social Responsibility at TIAA. And now she is the first African American and female President and CEO of the University of Michigan Alumni Association. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Corie Pauling. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you to have you here on the DDP.
Oh, my goodness.
Appreciate having you come on and talk to us today.
I am so glad to be here.
We are really excited. You are probably the biggest name we've had on the show so far. And that is exciting.
Yeah.
So tell me, where are you originally from?
I am from Detroit, Michigan. I am a Detroit girl.
All
I've been
right.
gone for a few years, but in my heart, I am a Detroiter. I grew up on Mack and Helen.
Okay.
On the east side, and my mom and I moved over to the Medical Center Village, not far from here, Warren and St. Antoine, in my later years before going off to college. But went to Cass Tech.
Green and white.
Yes, and was a cheerleader, so knew all that, and just so many memories of wonderful times in Detroit. I think that having left home made me appreciate all the things that it gave me for the journey.
Great preparation to come back.
Absolutely.
Well.
There's that. Yes. And not in my crystal ball. If you asked me 5 years ago, would I be in this role? I would not have envisioned it. But I will say that the path that I was on and the most recent work that I did leading inclusion, diversity, equity, and CSR at TIAA, that's a lot of letters there.
That's a lot of letters.
But that most recent span of time doing really impactful work in that area was the best preparation for this call to action and leadership with the Alumni Association, because what we are doing ultimately is engagement. And we're trying to do that as expansively as possible.
Okay. Well, hold on. Before we go down that road, we got some questions to lead up to that.
Sure.
Where'd you go to high school? You said Cass
Tech.
Okay. What prompted your decision to attend University of Michigan?
So the University of Michigan had an awesome relationship with Cass Tech in the 80s, as far as I understood from the time I stepped foot in that big building that's no longer there. And as I was driving up Woodward.
Definition of old school.
Old school, right. As I was driving up Woodward, as I mentioned to you that we were doing a community service project today for Black History Month through Focus Hope. So I was driving up Woodward from downtown today, and I looked over to my left as I crossed the lodge, and in my mind, I will always see that building, that 8-story building that used to be the Cass Tech. Yeah. And just kind of fondly looked that way and just had so many memories. But yeah, I was a Cass technician, computer science curriculum.
Okay.
I remember that. I just so many memories. Learned to love math there, which was a big part of me going into engineering at Michigan. Great teachers, really nurturing. You know, in Detroit, you grew up in the majority as an African American, and I can't tell you how important that was unknowingly for the affirmation and the esteem that comes from being told and showed that you can do it, that you are enough, you have a right to be where you are. Detroit did that for me as I grew up, and as I went on to Michigan, that foundation was really, really important.
Okay. So what led you to study engineering?
So I have always done well with puzzles and with problem solving, crossword puzzles, word search, mastermind, you name it, any toy as a kid, Rubik's Cube, any toy as a kid that involved solutioning and oftentimes like with my hands. I loved it. I could do it for hours. I was very close to my grandmother growing up. I like to say her name whenever I'm talking about her. Her name was Clara Mae Jennings Meeks from Sardis, Mississippi, and migrated as part of the Great Migration here in the 40s.
Okay.
And she was my best friend. So my grandmother and I did all these sorts of things together. I spent like all summers with her, and I really credit the fulfillment I get from problem solving from the things that she and I used to do every morning: crossword puzzles, word searches, mazes, puzzles. And I also think that helped in terms of geometry and just sort of positioning and manipulatives. Those are things that made me really fascinated by math ultimately. When I went to St. Philip's Lutheran Church for middle school. I went to Berry Elementary for elementary school, and I was always good at math. But when I got to Cass Tech, that's where I started to do the algebras, the geometries, the pre-calc, calculus, and figured out that I was really good at it. I'll tell a story really, really quickly about a young man named Matt McGuire, who is, as I understand it, a physics professor, a physics teacher in Grosse Pointe now. He was in my 9th grade class with me at Cass Tech, and he seemed to just get it. And I was struggling for first few weeks. And my mother said one day at my grandmother's house, she said, well, is there somebody you can call in your class to help you just figure out what we were working on? I remember we were working on order of operations. And I decided to ask this guy named Matt if I could call him to help me with my homework. And that night I called him, I had my homework out, he was on the phone, and he said, this is how you do order of operations. You do, this first, this first, this first, and just do this every time. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I credit that as changing the course, my high school course, because I was really good at art too. But from that moment on, it just all came together, and math was my favorite subject at Cass Tech. When I saw Matt at our 30th reunion, high school reunion a few years ago, believe it or not, 30 years, I told him, I said, Matt, thank you. He's like, what? I said, you don't remember, but you saved my high school career with just that one phone call. So engineering for me was just a manifestation of the things that I had a natural leaning toward. And even as I went on to law school, because I was engineering and then went to law school, even law school is problem solving. Yeah. Lawyering is problem solving with more of a human element, depending on the area of practice. And so for me, it's always about, can I solve it? Can I help? Can I kind of get to an outcome? What's the result? What's the answer? I love finality in that way. And I think the combination of all those things really are at the core of how I've progressed over the course of my career.
Okay. So what was your experience at U of M like? How involved were you? Did you pledge any sororities or anything like that? Or a sorority?
I did. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Beta chapter. I pledged in 1990. So 33 years ago. I cannot believe it. But I was on a line of 11. I was number 6 in Monty 11. And the SOARs and the D9 were my core community. Really an important part of helping address some of the isolation that you can feel in an environment where you are an underrepresented minority. And at Michigan at that time, and even today, that dynamic still exists. It's important for people to have outlets where they just feel comfortable. Yeah. They don't feel that they have to sort of question things about themselves, things about their ability to understand concepts in class, where they don't feel like if they ask a question, that they are representative of the entire community demographic community that they are a part of. Just all the weight that you carry into your educational experience. That community was a nice outlet for me. And we had fun. So, We had a good time in Ann Arbor, and lifelong friends made really important part of my journey, and love Michigan. So as much as I talk about some of the challenges, and there were some challenges for a number of my friends. I had never dealt with some of the things as directly as they did, but there were challenges. But one of the things I always knew, and I know in my heart as an alum, is I would say every Michigan alum is proud of having gone through those doors,
Oh, yeah.
gone through that experience, and leaving saying that I did that. And that's what we are trying to tap into through the Alumni Association, is really tapping into that pride that we collectively have and creating experiences as alumni around what Michigan does and did for us.
Well, I'm really impressed that you graduated from engineering. I got a good friend. I'm a couple years behind you at Cass and at U of M, but I got a good friend of mine who was a U of M engineering major, and he said the engineering students had a saying. They said, U of M engineering, where your best hasn't been good enough since 1817. And so I'm always really impressed with the engineering grads. And then I think it's wild it took a turn that you went to law school after that.
I did, yeah.
And you chose Northwestern. What was your experience like that in the Chicagoland area?
I love Chicago. Those were 3 good years. I was in Chicago from 1994 to 97. And I chose Northwestern over Michigan. I probably shouldn't share that. I would have been a Michigan law alum as well. But something in me knew that I needed to leave home. And not because I love Detroit. But something said I needed to step out and see some other part of the world. And you may laugh because Chicago's all of 4 hours away from here, so it's not like it's the other side of the world.
It's a different part of the world, though.
But it is a different experience, and I don't know where that wisdom or gut instinct came from to make that decision, and it was an expensive one too. I'm glad I did it because I do think that my worldview expanded, and some of the people I met just had, they had the whole globe in their perspective. They had traveled internationally. They spoke other languages. They ate different food. And both, Black folks like myself and others, just a real melting pot for me in terms of some of the exposure that I think I needed at that time. And I enjoyed my years in Chicago. I was actually just there last week for an alum event. Northwestern played the University of Michigan basketball team.
Oh, yes.
We won. Michigan won.
Michigan
People
won.
ask,
Yes,
who was I vying from? Like, of course, Michigan. No question about that. No house divided here. It was Michigan. But I enjoy going back to Chicago when I can. And again, pivotal point in my life. I will say that before I went to law school, I did work as an engineer.
Okay.
For just under a year. I was a manufacturing systems consultant. And I remember working for this company. When I interviewed, they talked about the projects that they had in Paris and London and Los Angeles. And again, I'm from the east side of Detroit. I'm like, oh my gosh, Paris, London. I've never been, at that point, I had never traveled internationally. And so I took the job, and my first project was in Winnipeg, Manitoba,
Okay.
Canada,
Yeah.
in February. So you think it's cold in Detroit?
Yeah,
No. There's a difference. That's a special thing there. And then my second project was was outside of Dayton, Ohio. So a small Ohio town.
So you did a year as an actual engineer, saying, you know what, I need to go to law school.
Yeah, I was like, I think I want to do that law school thing. I had taken a business law class as an elective at Michigan, and it kind of had me a bit curious about law because I really liked it. But I do think that experience helped seal it for me that I wanted something just a little bit more in the way of human interaction and impact. That's really important to me. So law was it. And I was motivated to go to law school. Again, a Michigan story. Reading the Michigan Daily on the way to one of my North Campus classes, Thurgood Marshall had passed away. And I remember reading about him in the paper and asking myself something I really never asked myself growing up in Detroit, first gen, blue collar family, super, super smart folks, hardworking. But we were about getting a good job, air quote, good job, not what are you passionate about? What business do you want to start? It was more of what's a good job? And so I remember reading that article about Thurgood Marshall and asking myself, how do you get to do something like that? Like civil rights and changing the world. Like how do you get to do that? I knew no lawyers. Again, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I knew no lawyers. I knew no one in grad school. I didn't even know how to go to law. I had to figure out, how do you even apply to law school? And the whole LSAT process, no idea how to do any of that. But it was that Thurgood Marshall article that I read in the Michigan Daily, plus that business law elective that I took, that made me say, I think I want to try this law thing.
Okay. And as you were in law school, what kind of law were you thinking of practicing?
So I went to law school very much on the, I want to be Thurgood Marshall. Like I want to do civil rights work. Which was again, it's problem solving with a human element, but different from what I've been doing, again, in manufacturing systems. I remember in Canada, in Manitoba, I was in a bus factory. And in Dayton, we were in I think it was a semiconductor facility. So civil rights is a little bit different. And I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall's life. So when I went to law school, that was my first thought, is figuring out how do you do civil rights work. And as often happens, paths take twists and turns, and what you think you're going to do, you end up doing something completely different. What ended up happening for me is I went the big firm route, which is a lot of law firms kind of steer you toward big firms. And I went down that path. I worked at an intellectual property firm, which was interesting. I worked at an labor and employment law firm. I worked at a business law firm. I even did environmental law for a short period. I had a part-time job working in the area of housing law in Chicago. And it's a long story, but that I won't tell in too much detail here, but somehow I ended up in North Carolina based on the two professors for whom I did research at Northwestern. I was dating a young man who I married, who was at Duke's Law School. And long story short, those professors told me, since I was going to take the North Carolina bar, to reach out to this lawyer, Anita Hotchkiss, in Charlotte while I was there. And while I am extroverted in my role, you can imagine engaging alumni, I have to talk and do this, but in my heart, I'm actually an extroverted introvert. So the idea of just calling a lawyer and saying, hey, I'm down here taking the bar, you want to go to lunch? That was not something I was comfortable doing, but I did it. And turns out she was at a civil rights law firm. And she said, why don't you apply for the position that we have in our law firm in Chapel Hill? And so you think about, and one of the things I've learned about life, and I'm really embracing this now at 52, I am learning to trust that it's going to be okay. That the decisions and the opportunities that have been before me, I think were what was supposed to happen. Yeah, I may have done things to kind of earn it or met the right person, but so many things I think are just predestined. And the fact that I ended up doing civil rights law, despite having gone to law school and from day one getting completely detoured, and it was only because of a lunch that I did not want to go to, where that lawyer said, just apply for the opening that we have in our small office in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, doing civil rights work, full circle for the whole reason why I even thought about law school. it's amazing to think about how that happened. It's an amazing story. And so I had the great honor of working with some of the finest, most impactful heroes and heroines in the area of civil rights work as my entree to being an attorney. And that was through the law firm that Julius Chambers started. Julius Chambers is a Michigan alum.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. He is from a small town, Mount Gilead in North Carolina, and went to North Carolina Central. He was the first Black person to be elected to law review, #1 in his class at UNC, University of North Carolina. I want to say he was the first Black person to go to the law school. Might have been the second. But he had a master's degree in history from Michigan. And in the 80s, he got an honorary doctorate. So who knew?
Yeah.
My law career started at a firm that was launched by a Michigan alum, doing some of the most profound, impactful civil rights work of our time. And I'm not overstating that. Julius Chambers and the fine lawyers that started that firm in the 60s was the first integrated law firm certainly in the South, I want to say in the country, but it was dedicated to civil rights. And so I'm talking about school desegregation cases, I'm talking about voting rights cases, I'm talking about employment discrimination cases, litigating at the U.S. Supreme Court level, busing cases. Julius Chambers' home was bombed. The law office was bombed. So this is not 1932. This is not 1922. This is in an era of a human being that I had the privilege of working with. He and the folks there, Fergie and Geraldine, Henderson, Luke, Gresham, many others, just tremendously committed, making an impact over the course of now 5 decades. And I landed there with an engineering degree and all this big firm experience. I was like so not the standard person that would have joined that firm, because everything about my background at that point would have said, you're not interested in civil rights. And I would have said, yes, I am, I promise you. When I thought about law school the very first time, it was because of civil rights and Thurgood Marshall. It just doesn't look like it on paper. But they gave me a shot, and I had to advocate for myself and what I really believed in. I think being able to say I grew up in Detroit helped, because I think people understand like what's in your soul. And I think there's an authenticity of Detroiters that makes people believe you even when it doesn't look like you're that ideal candidate. So I attribute that opportunity to my ability to talk about who I am, where I'm from, what matters to me, and ended up practicing civil rights law and making partner there for about 7 years.
Oh, wow. I think that it's funny you say not the ideal candidate, but I think sometimes people from, let's say, non-linear backgrounds tend to bring things to the table differently. I used to do recruitment for the University of Michigan, and I tell kids all the time, there is no pre-law or no pre-med major. You can major in anything you want and go to medical school, from anthropology to zoology. You can major in anything you want. Just take the prerequisite. And if the more offbeat thing you study or take, you bring something unique and different to the medical school process. You bring different problem solving skills, different analytical skills.
Absolutely.
You look at things. You coming from an engineering background and going into civil rights law, I think is fascinating and unique, because you can, like you said, you problem solve differently. You look at the issue differently. You structure it differently. And that's something the law firm, they really benefited from, I would think, overall.
It did. And I'll tell you, even as a lawyer doing that work, the math origin for me was very important. It helped with respect to settlements and mediations and economic analysis of, when folks have lost jobs, when they've lost their retirement, when when you're talking about damages in a lawsuit, there can be a lot of statistics, a lot of math involved. And so again, the fact that I had that comfort based on my Michigan education, really propelled me even in that work. But you're right. I think what you're talking about is the heart and soul of why inclusion, diversity, and equity is so powerful when it's harnessed in any industry, and not just in spaces where that's what they're focused on, but literally name the industry: financial services, retail, auto manufacturing, pharmaceuticals. Name your industry. There is an inclusion diversity vantage point that will make how you serve your client base stronger when you can anticipate their needs based on who they are. And so to your point about coming from different backgrounds and still wanting, the core thing, if you want to go to medical school, you want to go to law school, business school, having different perspectives at a table, looking at a common problem, the outcome, the result in terms of how it's solved is better when you have folks from different perspectives looking at it and sharing their views on how to get to the right end point. So I couldn't agree with you more. So to your point about maybe I wasn't the ideal civil rights litigator, young law student when I took that job or got that opportunity, I was not, but I did prove myself, and I proved where my heart was in terms of wanting to help people who were unheard, help people who were unseen, help people who weren't in the history books. Because I would look at them and I would think about my granddad. I would look at them, I think about my grandmother, my uncles, my aunts, people I love who I know are, again, some of the smartest people ever. I mean that. Hardest working, salt of the earth people. When I was doing civil rights work, I felt like I was representing them.
That's awesome. Like you say, you made partner. I'm curious as to, usually a lot of lawyers I know, they get into firms. The goal is to make partner and
Yes.
ride that out. Your career continued. You made partner and you seem to have left the firm. What led you to end up at TIAA?
So yeah, I made partner at Ferguson Stein Chambers, and again, just did some powerful work, even in my era. So I would have been late 90s, early 2000s. You would say, well, in that era, like, what civil rights is there left to do? There's a lot left.
Imagine in North Carolina.
There's that, right? But even in the North, because there are a lot of isms in the North too. May not be as front and center, but it's there.
Michigan looks the way it looks now for a reason.
Yes, for sure. So I did that work, and what I started to realize as I matured as a lawyer is you can be on, to your point, you can be on many sides of the table and be impactful. And so you can be impactful by fighting the good fight, filing the lawsuits, power to the people, that sort of mindset, representing the little guy or the little person, I should say. And you can do that. But as I grew in my understanding of law, I realized that you can be on other sides of that table and be as impactful. And so what I realized is I actually wanted to be in-house counsel at a company because, and I'll tell you why in just a second, I realized that what I wanted to do was be able to influence at a macro level, because one lawsuit, while it can change lives, like Chambers' Supreme Court cases are still the foundational cases for employment discrimination litigation today. So you could have an impact there, but one lawsuit can sometimes just be one lawsuit. And sometimes it won't even be, it'll be a blip on the screen in terms of, does it really change anything? And I started to realize that I could do more potentially working within a company. So I left my beloved Ferguson Stein Chambers, cried. It was, I had turned down 2 job opportunities over the course of my years there. Actually, they were organizations that we had opposed or that I had sued. They called later and said, are you interested? And at that point, I was still like, no, there you go. And at that point, I was like, nope, this is where my heart is. But as the years passed, I started to think, is there another way to do this? So I had a great opportunity to join a large firm that was starting up in Charlotte. And it's an international, global labor and employment law firm, huge. They recruited me to join their startup in Charlotte as a plaintiff's attorney. And what they realized is that to do that work effectively, you actually had to have a strong defense mindset, because I have to know what the other side is going to say about my claims before I even pursue the case. So I joined that firm as a partner, and I prayed that I did not get a case representing a company that I just couldn't stomach. Meaning, it just, from a personal constitution standpoint, if I felt like something wrong happened, I was like, please, I just don't want a case where I just can't, I could not advocate. I never got that case. I had a good experience there, really appreciative for the belief in my abilities and giving me that shot. But what I knew it would do is that it would position me for the in-house opportunity that I wanted at a company. And so I worked there, and sure enough, a few years later, an opportunity at TIAA emerged.
So hold on, you left 2 partnerships.
I did.
To go corporate.
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
And
I see you.
Okay. Yes, I did. And so I left that firm and went to TIAA, and ended up at TIAA for almost 17 years. I was 12 years on the labor and employment law team, progressing, promotions and things. So was able to do that. And what I theorized was true. I felt so impactful as corporate counsel for TIAA, because it's a great company, first and foremost. And we really tried to get to the right outcome. And you can imagine on employment law cases where people are talking about harassment, they're talking about disability issues, and they're talking about discrimination, they're talking about retaliation. It could get a little emotional, compensation issues, you name it. We really were always trying to do the right thing. Like, really, what is the right outcome? Did something happen here that we are not proud of? And what I realized as in-house counsel is that helping the company understand that we do need training, or we do need to take disciplinary action, or we do need a new policy, or we do need, we do need to have some dialogue sessions, or we do need business resource groups, or we do need different types of offerings for employees, and being a part of that. Like, doing that, I am impacting the lives of the entire workforce and their families and all the concentric circles that come from that. And I really enjoyed that. I really, really enjoyed that time. And look up, and 12 years have passed. And then the opportunity to lead inclusion, diversity, equity, and corporate social responsibility emerged about in 2018. And got that opportunity through sponsorship and having done great work. So hard worker, impactful, relationship builder, solution seeker, problem solver, all these things that really, again, start from my very early years with my grandmother. Those were things that I brought into how I engaged and partnered as an in-house lawyer, so that when the opportunity for the chief diversity officer position opened, it was a long process, but people thought I could do it and gave me a shot. And oh my gosh, talk about impact. I mean, think about 2020.
Yeah.
That catapulted the diversity, inclusion, equity conversation, the corporate social responsibility conversation, by leaps and bounds. And so, if I've always wanted to be a problem solver and focus on inspiring people and impact and paying it forward for all the things that have been done for me, the last 4.5 years at TIAA before joining the Alumni Association was that and more, because we were bringing conversations forward that were unprecedented, and we were innovating with metrics and policies and processes. You mentioned recruiting as your background, talent management, and we were taking that to our clients too. So an important part of how we built that team is we did a lot of things internally with our own workforce, but I said, our clients love this. I can talk to our clients. They want me to come and talk about diversity. How about we work with our clients on helping them build their own diversity programs? So it's almost like a consultancy within the HR department. And once we started doing that and clients were clamoring, help us get to where you are in this space, people really saw the connection between that work and business, because it really does matter.
Now, I just listened to a podcast over the weekend, and they were talking about DEI jobs growing all around the country, and it's just a big field that's grown like over 1,000%
Yeah.
in the last 5 to 7 years. I'm curious, in a field that you established a foothold in a growing area. You have this very diverse background.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're the president of the Alumni Association. That seemed like another plot twist.
Yes.
What prompted you to pursue the position with the U of M Alumni Association instead of staying in this,
In that
growing
space.
industry and space?
Very fair question. Well, first off, I wasn't looking. And that's, it's
Never
always
are
the
for these
best
kind of
way.
jobs. Yeah.
That's the best way to find the next opportunity. But I wasn't looking, and we were in our group. We were, highly regarded diversity inclusion program, top ranked in corporate America. In the 4.5 years that I led it, we were in the top 10 from one of the most scrutinizing organizations, Diversity Inc., for how they assess the impact and quality of programming that companies may offer. So we had the great honor of being in Diversity Inc.'s top 50 best of the best. We were, again, top 10 for 3 straight years. And again, we built new metrics. We launched the Be the Change platform in response to 2020, both the pandemic and the social justice movement. Be the Change just blew it out the box. I mean, you ask anybody at TIAA right now something about diversity and strategy, they're going to say Be the Change. Everybody knows Be the Change because it became our platform. And the reason I think it resonated is because it's simple. And it's inspirational, it's aspirational, it's challenging, but it's something that you could decide to do in this interaction with me. It's something that a company can do in terms of how it engages with the community or its clients. Be the Change can be macro, it can be micro. It can be in an email, it can be in a phone call, it can be in a podcast interview. We can all sort of think about, how are we showing up every day? Are we being the change? And so the Be the Change platform for us just became this call for how we wanted to lead. And importantly, it then became how we wanted to go to market. We've been started saying we want to be the change in financial services, and thinking about things like the pay gap, the racial wealth gap, talking about financial acumen, talking about access and pay inequity, talking about health inequities. The pandemic revealed even things like the digital divide, this whole concept of equity. And so the last 3 years, I would say from 2020 until I left last October, just top of the game. When the University of Michigan Alumni Association approached, well, as you pointed out, diversity roles are plentiful, so I would get approached about those opportunities. And I really wasn't interested in going to another company in a diversity capacity. What made the University of Michigan Alumni Association position different were three things. One is that the entire business model is engagement. It's not diversity connected to financial services or diversity connected to pharmaceuticals or diversity connected to whatever. It is the whole business of engaging alumni as expansively as possible. And that is at the heart and soul of inclusion and equity, and diversity is expanding the net. So the whole widget is engagement. And as the CDO at TIAA, coming into this space, that's what I'm bringing. I'm bringing things that I know effectively bring more people into the net. And this time the net is my fellow alum from Michigan, creating a space and a place for them to know that Michigan still cares and Michigan is still there for them, even as they have graduated and moved on. So that's my call to action, and that's how I see the impact and direction that we're going to be making. The second thing that appealed to me about the job is the president and CEO level, which says a lot about how the board values this role and the voice of alumni. And so being able to go from a CDO to a CEO, doing engagement, which is my, heart and soul, I had to look at that. Like, I can't say I was wanting to be a president and CEO, but when something is there right in front of you and makes sense, you got to look at that thing. Most definitely. And then the third thing is my own story as a Michigan alum, as a Detroiter, an East Side Detroit girl, first gen, having gotten an opportunity to go to Michigan from Cass Tech, having gotten a scholarship from Michigan, having gotten that engineering degree. I have an affection for this school. I am grateful that Michigan found me and helped set me on my course. So the idea of leading an organization where I have my own testimony is not a stretch. It is not a stretch for me to say how much gratitude I have for Michigan, for changing the course of my life. And that being part of my job too, I had to do it. So again, a painful decision. I called it sweet bitter, not bittersweet. But after almost 17 years, I left TIAA and joined the Alumni Association last October.
I keep hearing this trend of painful decisions, but you keep moving up
I know.
on each one. Your pain is leading your greatness.
Thank you for that.
I'm curious. What do you see as your biggest challenge in your new role?
Oh, good question. So the Alumni Association is a complex, dynamic organization. We have just about 80 employees on staff, and it's even more in the summer when we have summer staff at our camp in northern Michigan called Michigania, which I actually didn't know about, never been. I'm going to go for the first time this summer. Yeah, and see, the fact that you and I didn't know about that.
I knew about it.
You
never
been. Okay, well,
yeah.
The fact that neither of us have ever been is part of the opportunity that I think is ultimately where we're headed. So we're a complex, dynamic organization, and we have a travel program. We have a wonderful scholarship program called LEAD. We have a career services program. We do all sorts of events. Fiesta Bowl was a huge thing. We have a university relations team, a development team. You name it, there is something at the Alumni Association for most anything that an alum is interested in doing. And we're now 125 years old. So I joined in the 125th year. We're about 103,000 strong, but there are 657,000 alumni of the University of Michigan around the world.
Second largest living alumni base.
There you go. You know that.
Yeah.
And
University of Phoenix has the largest.
Isn't that something?
University of Phoenix.
So while those numbers are big and perhaps best in class, I see that as opportunity because I see in those numbers that there are 500,000 alumni who are alumni and they're not in the Alumni Association. And I don't know what their experience is as alum. Is there a connectivity to Michigan? Is Michigan still relevant for them? Do they feel that Michigan cares? That's our ultimate opportunity to grow this base and to engage them in ways that feels personal, that is in fact personal, and is inclusive in approach. So I mentioned that today we did a wonderful service event with Focus Hope for Black History Month in Detroit, and went to a senior citizens community and provided boxes of food for the month for those in need. For some people hearing that, they will say, oh my gosh, that is speaking to my heart. Maybe they're thinking about an elderly cousin or an elder or an elderly grandparent, whatever they may be sort of connecting to, hearing that we're doing things like that now, that's going to make them think about Michigan and the Alumni Association differently. The Fiesta Bowl I mentioned, we had a wonderful experience there. The team did a great job. Tailgate, pep rally, an unfortunate loss in the football game, but a great experience overall. But we added to our tour experience a 5K walk run. I'm a big runner.
Okay.
And I want to appeal to new graduates, new alumni. I want to appeal to young families of alum. I want to appeal to older alum, retirees, and do things that are energizing, that are wellness focused, that are out in the air. I'm a big outdoorsy person. You know, sun shining on my face is a good day. So we had our first ever 5K walk run as part of our bowl tour. We had a party. We just a party, just a DJ party at a bar, dancing, line dancing, cheering, all this. We just had a party. It was sold out. Had not done that before. And we had a community service project throughout the whole weekend where we're giving back. Again, that service element being a bigger part of what we do. And we connected with alum from around the world. And I think everybody had a great time. So just really trying to bring an energy, a vitality, a relevance to what the Alumni Association delivers for alum inclusively. I want to see more diversity in our alumni engagement activities, our events. I want to see Michigania. I want to see people really sort of going there. We're having a Black History Month at Michigania event this month. We're having a Women's History Month event at Michigania next month.
We should have a University of Michigan Black Alumni event at Michigania specifically.
Hey,
that would be interesting.
I'm for it. And I didn't go to northern Michigan. The farthest north I had gone, I think, was Midland, Michigan, until last year. I went to Traverse City for the first time. And so many of us don't know much about our own state. Growing up in Detroit, it's like the Michigan is sort of southeast Michigan, and there's so much more. So we have a wonderful donor base, volunteer base. We have our loyal community of alum who are with us. They travel with us. They are scholarship donors. They're lead donors. They're doing fantastic things. They support the Alumni Association. They support the university, and we are thankful to them. And all I'm saying is, I know there's many, many more folks out there who we're going to bring into this net and create this wow factor alumni experience.
Okay. You all do these trips, the alumni trips around the world.
We do.
Is there a particular place that you personally would like, I'm the boss, I'm taking that trip? If it came up, is there a place in the world where you just be like, oh,
I gotta go.
I've got to go?
Yeah, so this year we are going to Singapore, we're going to Switzerland, and we're going to Peru.
And you want to go on all three?
And I want to go on all three. I wish I could. I'm actually doing a 25-city tour, trying to just engage with alumni all around the world. And so separate from that. So I'm doing a lot of traveling this year. International travel. I've already been to London, going to Singapore. I am going to Singapore.
Thing. You need an assistant, an intern?
No.
Carry your bag?
I know. It's like some days I pinch myself and I'm like, am I working? But yeah, so we have a pretty extraordinary travel program that, again, in the spirit of inclusion, we're looking at how we can make it more accessible for more alum. Yeah. So the travel program has done these just outstanding trips, literally all over the world. Yeah. My predecessor, Steve Grafton, talks about all the places he's been all around the world because of that. And they are fabulous, fantastic. But we're going to be talking about adding a diversity element to that. So next year, we're going to do our first Black History Month trip, looking at Blacks in Cuba.
Okay.
That history. We're talking about Pride Month and talking about like a civil rights, a women's civil rights trip, women's wellness oriented trips. Even with our Latina brothers and sisters, and and the broader community, looking at trips that are geared toward those cultures. We're talking about doing shorter trips, so not trips that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, perhaps, but perhaps it's a day trip, perhaps it's a weekend getaway. So again, more alumni can get involved and have an opportunity to participate. So that's an equity effort there. So you see how through this strategy, diversity, inclusion, and equity, and a sense of corporate or community engagement is at the heart and soul of how you engage, but importantly, how you grow. And that's the business bottom line in this. By expanding our net, we create a broad, wonderful experience for our alum, those that we have already been engaged and that we are truly appreciative for, and all those who are to come.
Well, that is exciting. In the interest of time, we're going to shift things a little bit.
Okay.
But your story, we could be here for a long time,
Yeah.
I see. But just also keep going. You need a chaperone for one of those international
I
trips.
got
Keep me
you.
in mind.
I got you.
We're going to shift just a little bit and ask you some things. This is what we call our lightning round, where we ask all our guests the same questions. And this is more about your engagement in the city of Detroit and your experiences here.
Mm-hmm.
And the first question is, what's your Coney order?
Okay. Don't take my Detroit card. Don't take it. I don't do Coney Island. I don't. I haven't yet. Maybe you and I can go do that and I'll decide. But I don't do Coney. Sorry.
Okay. We get the chance. I'll take my favorite Coney Island in the city. Is just up the street.
Down, I know
Detroit,
where they
Coney
are.
Island.
I know where they are.
It's the best Coney in the city.
So
in my
I ate
opinion.
Nicky's. We at Cass when I was there, we would walk downtown, go to Nicky's.
That's pizza.
Pizza.
Yeah.
That was our thing.
But you didn't have a neighborhood Coney like
I
up the
did
street on
not.
the east side.
I did not. No, I'm sorry. I don't take my Detroit card. Do not take my Detroit card.
Okay.
I'm a rebound on this next question.
You're coming back.
I'm coming back. I'm coming
Okay.
back.
Second question is Verner's or Fago?
Verner's.
Okay. Better made potato chips or Lay's?
Better made.
Okay. Where is your favorite place to go in the city?
I enjoy Belle Isle.
Okay.
And I say that because, well, I grew up not too far from there. So for me, just saying, as I flew in today, I'm on the airplane and...
She flew in today. Okay.
Yes, I flew in today. As I flew in today, the plane goes over, I suppose that would be Lake Erie, and you can see the Detroit skyline in the Detroit River, and you can see Belle Isle. And I actually took a picture of it. And I fly a lot, but I took a picture of Belle Isle because as a child, Belle Isle was like a kid's paradise. There was a zoo, the giant slide, picnics, and then as I got older as a teenager on that strip, we used to ride through the woods. My dad, there was a golf range.
Yeah.
I remember my dad's now passed away, but I remember a picture that he and I took on the boardwalk on a really cold day, winter day. So memories. But then I also fast forward that to today. I'm a runner, and the first marathon that I did was, I came home for it. I came to Detroit to do my first marathon. It was in 2013. The Freep. Yeah. Had no idea that that Detroit hosts a race, 50,000 people. And it's been going on for years. But once I became a runner and that whole community emerged for me, I was just wowed that Detroit has one of the most unique races ever, because you run into another country. Yeah. Not only do you run into another country, you run across a bridge and you come back through the tunnel.
You did the whole 26, 42?
Yeah, I've done 15 marathons. Yeah.
I did the 13. I did the half.
Half marathon, yeah.
It was the worst experience
No.
in my life.
I think the half is the best race.
I did it out of hubris. I didn't train. Well, we
know what happened there. That would be miserable.
Yeah.
Just train a little bit. The half marathon is the best race. It's just long enough where it's you are like, when is this thing over? But it's short enough where you can still give it your best effort. You're not just sort of completely wiped out. So I'm a big fan of half marathons. And in fact, I have a friend in Charlotte who just finished her 50th state marathon. She's done 63 marathons. She did her 50th state in Hawaii. So she's done a marathon in every state in this country, saved Hawaii for last, and a big group of us went out and supported her in Maui last month in January. So based on her example, her inspiration, I was thinking to myself, well, I could do half marathons or all around the country. And again, that's just a testament to how much I like that race. But going back to Belle Isle, I decided to do Detroit Free as my first marathon in 2013. And what Belle Isle was for me at one time was very different when I got on Belle Isle during that marathon at mile 22, thinking, I'm so ready for this race to be over. And I remember looking as I was running, I remember looking at the giant slide. And I was so exhausted. I didn't want to look at it. But still, it was so nostalgic to be running across that bridge and running around in spaces and places where I grew up as a kid, and seeing it be a part of a really important thing that has emerged for me as a runner, as an adult. So Belle Isle for me kind of transcends my life journey from what it was as a young girl on Helen Street to what I am now, 52, an avid runner where I absolutely have to run, and being able to have enjoyed Belle Isle as, you know, one of my first big achievements in the running space.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more questions. Yeah. Who was your favorite Detroit athlete?
I am going to say I got to give it to my Pistons, the Bad Boys. And so it's not one of them. It was all of them. Yeah. And that may, people may not like that. But it's true. Like during that era for me, I was at Michigan or in high school and at Michigan, I believe. And it was just a great time in my life. I mean, the games, even the image of the Bad Boys, like it was Detroit. It was just hardcore Detroit. That's just who we are. And so I would have to say the Bad Boys. Runner up would be Tommy Hearns. Okay. So growing up, you remember boxing was all of that. The Sugar Ray Leonard, the Tommy Hearns, the Larry Hagler. Yeah. All those folks. So boxing was a big thing at a point in my life in Detroit too. So runner-up would be Tommy Hearns.
Okay. And who was your favorite Motown artist?
Ooh. Stevie Wonder.
Great. I've actually seen him in concert. That was awesome.
I as much as I love math and you've heard me talk about problem solving and things, I am also a lover of beautiful writing. And Stevie Wonder's music it's just poetry.
That's true.
It is just poetry. It's just incredible talent. And I think he's a giant. So I'd have to say Stevie.
Okay. And then last question is, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me in Detroit these days and in Ann Arbor. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I probably need to tweet more. But I am building more of a social media presence. It's an important part of how we want to brand the Alumni Association. So you can find me online on pretty much all those outlets. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is not social media for social media's sake. I think social media is a space where you really can influence. You really can talk about issues that we know matter to people, even when it's sort of a controversial issue. I think dialogue helps everyone elevate if they're listening to each other. If you're listening to listen, we can all grow. We don't have to agree, but we can grow. When I was at TIAA, one of my team members had a great concept called Real Talks, respectfully engaging, listening, and learning. And we use that as a vehicle to talk about topics in the pandemic era, the George Floyd era, and all the sort of isms that have emerged, to talk about issues that we knew were dividing people, but that we couldn't be silent about anymore. And so one of the things that I believe social media can do, when done appropriately, is facilitate people sort of learning from each other. Now, we see other behavior for sure, but through the Alumni Association, and not just through social media, but through some of our programs, we're going to create space for that type of connectivity, that type of engagement, because that's what we do.
Well, that's awesome, man. We're very thankful for you coming on. We know you're a very busy person. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for the invitation.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Corie Pauling, the new president and CEO of the University of Michigan Alumni Association. Get used to this space. You're going to be seeing a lot of her. And this has been the Distinctly Detroit podcast. We ask you to please subscribe, rate, and comment, and listen. Subscribe, rate. What's the other one? Comment on our show. You can get us again. We're anywhere you get your pods, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Music, and we will see you all next time. Thank you for listening to the Distinctly Detroit podcast. This is a production of the University of Michigan Detroit Center, and you can find us anywhere you get your pods. Please rate, review, and subscribe. This podcast is directed and produced by Marlon Franklin, edited by Taylor Henniger, with writing contributions by James Neely and Leah Allen. Thank you for listening.